By the way, Happy New Year, guys, classmates. And I am tasked to present the portion of the book written by Mr. Christian U. Becker. It's about business ethics, methods, and application. And the portion actually, which is taken from that article, is the individuals in the world of business. Actually, it's a 33 pages, if I'm not mistaken, and it focuses more on the ethical aspects of specific roles and profession. So yeah, again, my name is Chris Adlawan. So I'm actually a colleague of yours, a student in Masters in Information Technology, of course, in the same school. And tonight is January 4th, here in the Philippines, by the way, 2022. Okay, so yeah, let me begin by providing this deck. I have, well, actually, I provided a summary of everything about the article. So in alignment with the objectives, no? And this is like actually this presentation description. So what this presentation is all about, so that we are guided by this presentation objectives as well. Well, this presentation has been designed to discuss the key points of a portion of an article written by Christian U. Becker about individuals in the world of business, and of course discuss the 10 principles of ethical leadership. Yeah, there's a lot. There are 10 principles mentioned from the article, and aside from the 10 principles, actually there are other principles, and which is actually the core principles of professional ethics. And and actually the last one is yeah, I have noticed that there are some examples written from the article, and I try my best to share that to you, to all of you, so that we could have this share some examples of application by profession, or the individuality based on the article itself. Then I have yeah, formulate the learning objectives. So what can we gain by participating or by listening to this presentation? Well, number one is, of course, be knowledgeable and learn from the author the ethical aspects of specific individuals in the world of business. Then, to become aware on the principles that can be applied to our respective roles in our organization. We all know that we have different positions in our respective organizations, right? As a leader, as an employee, some of us as a director, as a head of department or manager. No? And of course, another learning objective is to relate and realize the importance of professional ethics as an individual to our day-to-day job responsibilities, may it be as a team member, a team leader, or an individual by profession. Actually, while I'm doing this presentation and while I'm honing this contents based on my readings, so it reminds me on the values, on the ethics, especially of the professional ethics, which is I am really happy about it, because I got reminded of these things that that is essential for a leader, like us. All right, so and I crafted an agenda so that we are guided by this presentation's agenda. First, I will be discussing the individuals in the world of business, the types, roles, and its ethical responsibilities. Being an employee or a team member, and of course, being a leader or being a manager. And when we say being a manager, we of course we need to know what would be the ethical standards, or what are the professional ethics of our followers, of our team members, right? So that's the reason why I have included the the idea of presenting the being an employee and team member. Then followed by the 10 principles of ethical leadership. I'll discuss one by one. I'll try my best to provide you a clarity of what I have understood with the article. Then the third agenda would be the professional ethics, and what makes it different with the principles of ethical leadership. And of course, there is a core principle. The article called it core principles of professional ethics. So we will be discussing those as well. Actually, there are five general core principles aside from the 10 principles. Then last but not the least, of course, is the professional ethics examples and by application. So there is actually two examples provided by Mr. Christian U. Becker. Um, an example to on how to apply the core principles when you are considered one of the professionals in the industry or individual in performing in the business world. All right, so yeah, starting with, of course, with the first agenda, the types, roles, and its ethical responsibilities. Okay, so as described from the article, individuals participate in various ways in the economy and business world. We all participate as consumers in the global economy. Of course, many work as employees. Some are entrepreneurs. Some have leadership functions, and some consider themselves members of a specific profession or work in specific fields, such as marketing, accounting, real estate, or financial or finance. And of course, us, IT. And in organization and companies, many individuals actually interact with each other in various different roles and positions. In this presentation, we will highlight ethical aspects on the individual level that correspond to the specific roles, jobs, or functions in the organization that implies a specific ethical challenges and responsibilities. Because as I have understood with the article, there are specific ethical challenges comes with specific practices by profession. And of course, the responsibility aside from the challenges. A good example of this is, say, a leader in the organization has different responsibilities and faces different challenges than her team members, of course, as well as different types of individuals by profession, such as an accountant, an engineer, or as an IT specialist, right? Well, I've noticed that the article emphasizes that ethical responsibilities of specific roles are not actually completely subjective. But to some extent, it says that it is defined also by characteristics of the role or by its professional codes or by means of expectations from a certain colleague, business partners, or even the public, because it involves as well the public interest. Then say, well, this actually reminds me of my personal experience. I just want to share it with you. Perhaps a decade ago, when I was offered to handle and to head a certain division in a certain organization. It's more of financial industry organization. Then before I used to focus more on the job descriptions and of course the salary and benefits, right? The upgrades of the benefits, the car program, etc. Which eventually, during the progress and course of my day-to-day job and responsibilities, and even up to this moment, I feel the need to learn and adapt the different business ethics in our organization, which is actually essential to one's career, or I can say to my career as an IT. So now I'll be discussing more about individual as an employee and as a leader as defined from the article. So the picture shows different professions. No? We have the accountant, the nurse, the physician, the doctor, uh, the engineers and the workers, and of course the entrepreneur, and of course the professor, and us, the IT specialist, right? All right. So in article, there are actually two: being an employee and being a team leader or being a manager. And of course, it is evident that a large number of people participate in business contexts by being an employee, right? Even if we are a manager, we're still part of the employee workforce. Then each individual or even in general role of an employee comes with specific ethical aspects. Has specific ethical aspects. And employees are also bound to the policies, procedures, and different business processes of an organization, which makes it subjected to the power structure of that company, right? And the role of being an employee is characterized by a certain degree of dependency and vulnerability, which results, or perhaps can result to specific ethical issues, since you are prone to the, abuse of power, abuse of authority, etc. Then employees are also means, or also a means to achieve the ends of the company. Of course, that's the reason why these stakeholders or these leaders in the organization or the owners of the organizations hired us as a professional or hired us as an employee or part of the organization. And us, we as an employee, if we are happen to be on the side of the employee part of the organization, well, we rent our skills, right, and abilities in exchange or in order to make for a living. So that's actually the thing, the relationship being an employee to the organization. Then, of course, ethical aspects of being an employee, we have this moral rights and moral responsibilities, not just moral rights. Okay. So let's focus now on moral rights and moral responsibilities of being an employee. Then later on, I'll be discussing more about being a leader and what are the ethical aspects of being a leader. But right now, let's focus first on being an employee so that we know how to, to manage, especially our followers, our team members. So since employees has a moral rights, and that is part also of ethical aspects of being an employee, well, there are actually three. I noticed three ethical standards or ethical ethics, no, or different moral rights discussed by the article. So the first one is based on Kantian ethics. Then I do my research. Kantian ethics, it's actually Kant named after with the German philosopher Immanuel Kant. And in simple terms, Kantian ethics deals more on the deontological, which focuses on responsibility, intention, and duty. And humanity should be treated always an end and never as means only. So that is part of the moral rights of being an employee. So it's not just a means, no. It's not just a tool, but should be fairly treated always as an end. Then another one is based on virtue ethics. So what do we mean by that? The article emphasizes that this is also part of the moral rights of being an employee. So meaning to say, it's every person has a fundamental right to flourish and develop his or her potential toward personal excellence. So we need to, to provide that venue to hone their career, to develop their foundational knowledge, their fundamentals, and provide them a potential or opportunity to grow. So a good example of this is employees have a right to meaningful work and a supportive work environment. Meaningful work would mean inspiring, challenging work that enables employees to flourish and to develop the professional and personal potential toward excellence. Then the third one is based on ethics of care. So this is another part of ethical aspects based on moral rights of being an employee. What do you mean by based on ethics of care? Everyone has the right that his or her vulnerability and lack of power, ability, or knowledge is not ignored, okay, or abused, but cared of. So that is actually at the center of ethics of care, the caring. You need to provide care, no, to your colleagues, to your subordinates, not to abuse the vulnerability or lack of power, and also the lack of ability and knowledge. Because uh, if we apply this in our day-to-day job, they're not actually attending the strategic planning, the different board of directors meeting, right? Not everybody else attended that, but as a leader, we have access to that information, and by doing that, so we have the power and we have the knowledge and everything, and we shouldn't you know abuse that authority. And that is actually part of the moral rights of being an employee. So based on ethics of care. As I remember, best example is actually the government. Um, well, any government in the hemisphere, um, government are actually formulating laws and enforce it via IRR, or we call it implementing rules and regulations, right? Here in the Philippines, we call it DOLE, and DOLE has to follow the laws of the labor organizations, codes of the Philippines. Then there is a particular implementation rules and regulations to that law. Then that IRR employees are now bound with their legal rights, such as right to a minimum wage, right to have an occupational health and safety workplaces, etc. So that actually protects the moral rights of employee, the ethics of care, and also the Kantian ethics and virtue of ethics. Then, aside from um, moral rights, of course, we also have moral responsibilities of being an employee, right? As mentioned from the previous slide, employees have moral rights, but also has a moral responsibilities toward their employer and their coworkers. So they have these responsibilities, and employees can ask to be treated with respect and fairness, but one can likewise ask employees to be respectful and fair to their employer and coworkers, right? So, what are the moral responsibilities of being an employee? So, first is to be truthful about the skills and ability, of course, to perform well. Remember that employees rented out their skills, right? As mentioned a while ago, and ability to the employer. Without this to be truthful about the skills and ability, without this principle, it simply violates the basic principle of honesty and truthfulness, right? This is also means that employees agrees to contribute their skills, their talents, abilities, and other work responsibilities with commitment, be supportive to the overall success of the organization. So that is the first one. There is the moral responsibilities to be truthful about the skills and ability to perform well. Then the next one is professionalism. Professionalism as defined from the article. If the employee has specialized professional skills, for instance, an engineer, accountant, or physician, or a lawyer, this person is responsible for performing work according to current professional standards. And later on, I'll be discussing the professional ethics, and that is about the professional ethics. And the professional or the individual that is a professional, considered as professional, has a specific ethical responsibility to ensure the quality of the work and adhere to the principles and state of the art of the profession. It is impeccably right since usually this professional knows more than the employer, right? That's the reason why we hire these abilities and different talents in our organization, right? Or any other person in the company, uh, the specifics or the details of the job requirements, no, about the area of their work of these professionals. No one, or I can say that no one other than the professionals that we hired can fully control and verify the work has been done with the professional standards, or we can refer it to the code of practice depending on the profession. So that's professionalism. That's about professionalism. And another moral responsibility of an employee is not to harm the employer. Although an employee has no specific power over the employer, the employee could harm the employer in various ways. For instance, harm could be done by stealing goods or, time from the company, misusing company resources for private purposes. What else? Negatively talking about the company in public or bad mouthing, etc. So that's another moral responsibility of being an employee.
Okay,
Then,
Chris,
yeah,
could I just add something?
sure, sure, sir, sure, sir.
Yeah, well, in various seminars in the past, every time I would, let's say, have participants from labor unions,
Mm-hmm.
I would bring up this idea that, okay, it's accepted. Labor unions primarily exist to protect the rights of workers.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I also add that, okay, secondarily, you have to protect the company.
Yeah, agree.
Because if that is forgotten, and you just focus on the
Idea.
protecting the rights of the members, which is legitimate. Well, what if in the end, well, we forget about our responsibilities and the company suffers? So we end up, they end up losing their jobs.
Yeah.
So the secondary purpose is also super important, meaning protecting the company to the extent that they can.
Yes. Agree.
Okay,
Agree, sir. That's
that's
that's that's actually correct. Thank you, Sir Sen.
okay.
And yeah, and actually that's related to the last moral responsibilities of being an employee is the loyalty. As mentioned by Dr. Sen, loyalty to the employer could include not harming the company, right? As mentioned, but also supporting the success of the company, and of course the commitment or committing to the core values and mission of the company, as well as representing them when working with other stakeholders or customers. You promote the vision, the values, the core values, the mission and vision statements of the organization, not to be taken away of that idea. to the members of the organization. So that is actually part of the moral responsibilities of being an employee. And thank you, Sir Sen, for the example, no, for the union. Actually, that's precisely right. And we experienced that actually in real world scenario. Then yeah, so those pretty much are the ethical aspects of being an employee. Then let's now move forward with the ethical aspects of being a team leader or being a leader, being a manager. Um, well, being a manager has different levels in various positions, right? So it can be a team leader, supervisor, manager, director, president, CEO, even the president of the of the nation is considered as a leader. Then can be defined as an organization function in pursuing a well-defined end. So that is one of the ethical aspects of being a leader. So you have the objective driven out by the whole organization, and you are tasked to to push that objective together with your colleagues, together with your subordinates as a leader, and you are trusted by the leadership committee to your entrust to hold that authority so that you achieve this well-defined end. And of course, significantly influences the ethical culture of the organization. And that's the reason why we really need to attend seminars. The reason why Dr. Sen perhaps is um, providing different seminars because this is really important as a leader, because we are significant to the organization and we influence the ethical culture of the organization, the discipline. Then, of course, take charge in shaping formal and informal ethical aspects and impacts the behavior. No? You promote the culture of doing greatness, doing perfections. No? What else? Take charge in development of team members, since that is part of the moral responsibilities of being a employer, team member. So we are bound as well as a leader to take charge in development of our team members. And of course, the unique one is comes with a certain amount of power and control over others. So meaning, um, this can result to ethical challenges actually on how to properly justify and use this power, which on the next slide I will discuss more to these two crucial questions. There are two crucial questions that we need to answer when we are defining the leadership. The first one is what defines great leadership, right? And the other one is what are the ethical foundations of leadership? Those are the two questions mentioned from the article as well. And I'll try my best to share that to you. Okay, on the next slide, the question is now is what defines great leadership? Okay. So I do my little research about different leaders, global leaders, may it be business or you know, or whatever it is. The first one that I noticed is Mr. Warren Buffett. Buffett. It says that without passion, you don't have energy. Without energy, you have nothing. Then another considerable or considerably leader is Pablo Escobar, right? I know we know Pablo Escobar, right? Then he says that everyone has a price. The important thing is to find out what it is. Then another, well, considerably leader is Joseph Stalin. He says that death is the solution to all problems. No man, no problem. So, kakaiba, no? And another leader, of course, one of our favorite, Steve Jobs. He mentioned that if you are working on something that you really care about, you don't have to be pushed. The vision pulls you. And that's really a good one. And another considerable leader in the past is Adolf Hitler. No? If you tell a big enough lie and tell it frequently enough, it will be believed. Then another one, in contrary with Adolf Hitler and Stalin, is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He says that the popular statement, I have a dream, that my four little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. So again, the question is what defines great leadership? Because if we don't define it, we might consider Pablo Escobar, Adolf Hitler, or Stalin also a leader, right? But the article emphasizes on how to define great leadership. And there is actually a formula to that. And it called the criteria of being effective and ethical. So that is the criteria for a great leadership. Well, there's a figure in the article, so I just grab it and put it here in the presentation. So first is effective leadership, this one. And the other one is we need to marry it with ethical leadership, not just being effective leaders. We need to marry it with ethical leadership so that we, if combined both, if we combine both, it can form great leadership. And as based on the previous slide showing the photos of different leaders, great leaders also employ ethical means to make people follow, which is in contrast to Stalin or Hitler, who employed ethically questionable means, right? Such as deception or deceit, manipulation, and threats, and force people to follow. Great leaders inspire people with great ideas and goals to follow them. This would also hold for great business leaders like Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, etc., who strive not only for the personal benefit and profit maximization, right, but also for making business a positive force in the world and for having an overall positive impact on the world. Imagine us performing our jobs without the operating system, without the Microsoft Windows, without the application programs like AutoCAD, right? How do engineers, lay out this different structural engineering without the AutoCAD? Imagine without having the iOS devices, right? The Android devices, etc. And these inventions of these great leaders or these ends of or product are produced by different great leaders fuel the workforce on not just to work harder but smarter, right? And they influence us. And yeah, basically on the next slide, we will be discussing on what are the foundations of the leadership because we have two questions, right? And the next question would be what are the foundations of leadership? And I've noticed in the article that the foundation is straightly pretty much forward to the 10 principles, the 10 principles of ethical leadership. Because aside from the fundamental ethical principles discussed a while ago, such as the content principles, which is the respect of rational persons, virtue principles of human excellence, right? You keep pushing the people towards excellence. That is virtue principles. And the principles of ethics of care. We have explained that a while ago. Then we are about to discuss the 10 principles of ethical leadership as part of the foundations of the leadership as defined from the article. All right, so yeah, the first principle is ethical leadership is based on the fundamental values of a free and equal society of autonomous, rational persons. What do you mean by this? So this principle of leadership requires justification and needs to be established by principles that are compatible with freedom and equality. So leadership also needs to be established and controlled by acceptable mechanisms. For instance, in a society of free and equal persons, the natural mechanism to establish leadership is by agreement of all involved or by more practicable mechanisms such as majority vote. So which reminds me when we are working with different board of directors like right or different strategic committee and we are on the same level of management levels or we are on the same positions and if we are stuck with the decision, we put it into a vote, right? So that is actually part of the 10 principles of leadership. And yeah, I'm happy to say that I noticed that here while I'm reading that. So that is the first principle. And the second principle is ethical leadership serves some common good. So what do you mean by this second principle? It aims to establish common good for the leader and the followers. For example, in business organization, the common good for the CEO and the employees is the success of the corporation, which benefits both, right? Employees can benefit the securing of their jobs, getting salaries meaningful and challenging works, great work atmosphere, promotion, etc. This principle of leadership creates maximum overall value for all stakeholders. So that is the second principle. Then the third principle is ethical leadership is respectful, of course. It should. It considers followers as reasonable beings and ends in themselves, which remind us with Kantian ethics, right? By implying this principle number three, leaders never treat followers as mere means or for achieving the goals of leadership, but always at the same time respects every follower as a person and not, as a tool or an equipment. So we treated them as reasonable beings and ends in themselves. That is the third principle, being respectful. Then the fourth one is ethical leadership is grounded in reasonable principles rather than in oppressive or authoritarian power mechanisms. Okay. So this principle, when practiced, leaders are always ready to provide reasons when followers are in doubt about the decision. For instance, any request that serves the end of the leadership or the success of the company or a given project usually refers as reasonable follower or reasonable. However, requests that are unrelated to the goals are not reasonable. Requests that are unethical, illegal, are also unreasonable, even if they would serve the project or goals of the organization. So that is the fourth principle, which is the ethical leadership is grounded in reasonable principles rather than in oppressive or authoritarian power mechanism. Hindi yung porket boss is okay na, di ba? Hindi ganun. So number five, the fifth principle is ethical leadership requires only um, the minimum amount of power necessary to lead. Okay, this is really important. And as described from the article, power is not an end itself. I realize that, but a means for achieving the ends of the leadership. This is to avoid an unnecessary accumulation of power and potential negative side effects of power, such as abuse of power and corruption. And power should always be limited in amount and time. That is the fifth one. And the sixth one is ethical leadership is transparent, participatory, and empowering. So this is to be transparent about deliberations and decisions and empower employees to contribute, to participate in decision making as far as it is feasible. No? And people in the organization working different jobs and levels of the organization usually recognize different issues, right? And spot different potentials for improvement because they are the ones who are operating the nitty gritty of the operations, right? And empowering them or empowering these persons or these individuals will surely contribute to the success of leadership and, and to the organizations in general. So that is the sixth one. The seventh one is ethical leadership is responsible. So what do you mean by that? It has role-specific responsibilities to followers, to the organization, the ends of the ends and means of the leadership, and to the stakeholder. There is a specific roles of being responsible leaders. And this is able and willingness to respond in critical questions from the followers, stakeholders, and explain decisions and actions are also part of being responsible ethical leadership. When you are about to ask or be challenged with your decisions, you are ready and based on the ethical standards of the organization. Then the eighth one is ethical leadership empowers individual responsibility of followers. So this principle of ethical leadership promotes shared responsibility and empowers all followers to act responsibly, well, together. This is in line also with treating followers as rational person, again, Kantian ethics, who have the capacity for ethical reasoning and reasonable deliberation. Then the ninth one, second to the last, ethical leadership promotes excellence. Okay. Actually, my favorite one. This principle is an implication of virtue ethics, the ability to read different potentials in every employee and to support every employee in the best way to optimally develop their professional and personal potential. As it says, di ba? Every person is different as well as potentials are different. The ability also to recognize the unique characteristics of each employee and help them to develop professional excellence and also promotes professional excellence, including ethical attitudes and actions, consistently act in ethical ways and uphold company values, policies, and rules, and sets an example among the follower and inspires them to do the same. Well, the practice is leading by example. Then the 10th one, the last principle of 10 principles of leadership is ethical leadership cares about followers. Then from an ethics care perspective, as we discussed a while ago, ethical leadership cares about its followers. This means considering the power asymmetry as an obligation to secure the well-being of the followers and not just as a tool to control and command them. So power asymmetry, just to put light on it, actually it's a relationship between two individuals in which one, the powerful person or the commander, has control over the outcomes of the other or the subordinate, but not vice versa. It's always like that. That is power asymmetry. That's the reason why in our previous discussion, as ethical aspects of being a leader, we don't abuse the power, because we are bound to to hold control and power over our subordinates, and that is part of the 10 principles of leadership. All right. Okay. So um, in the article, professional defines as experts who have specialized knowledge and skills in a certain area. Well, I'll be discussing right now the professional ethics and its core principle. Again, another business ethics, but this time it's more of professional ethics, and professional ethics has its own core principles as well. All right, so yeah, just to provide a classic example of this, we can consider physicians, lawyers, engineers, accountants, IT, no? Professors as part of the professional individual that that performs in our business world environment. Then I did my research. Some examples of existing ethical standards by profession are for medical practitioners or physician. They have these ethical standards, and they have this principle of respect of life. And another one is principle of primum. I just forgot. Yeah, primum non nocere. It's a Latin word actually, and the meaning of it is do no harm to the patient. So that is their, prima facie. So one of the ethical standards of doctors and medical practitioners. And for the lawyers, um, based on my research, they are bound to uphold the Constitution, promote respect for law and legal processes, etc. And for the engineers, uh, their professional ethics is, or are, promote safety based on building codes and prevailing law of building structures. Another one is ensure the security of society and mitigate disasters, etc. So those are the professional ethics by profession. Well, to summarize, each profession has its own ethics and standards. No? However, with this presentation, we will summarize the core principles of professional ethics as described from the said article. Okay, so a few more slides. Sorry. So yeah, well, I summarize it actually. There's a lot of readings, but I summarize it into three. Well, the key things to remember in professional ethics, I noticed that the article says that professional ethics does not replace personal ethics, which is really important, right? And the second one is professional ethics and principles are more objectively defined, though than personal values. So it's actually defined, objectively. Then the third one is we develop personal values, right? And principles as private persons. While in comparison, professional ethics are adaptable and must be applied, uphold to our professional work. So that makes it different with our personal values, with our core principles, personal core principles, the professional ethics. So that's the summary. Then with the core principles, there are five core principles or five general principles of professional ethics. The first one is competency. The second one is objectivity. The third one is responsibility. The fourth one is integrity. And the last one, the fifth one, is public interest. So I will provide summary of every core principles in the next slides. Well, the first principle, competency. Basically, it's duty of each professional to ensure their own competency when providing professional services. So a professional typically must have a higher level college degree, right? And pass some standardized tests to qualify for working in a given professional field. Even though you are a college graduate, you need to specialize something. If you're a civil engineer, you need to take the board exams, diba? You need to practice it, etc., and so on. Even in the medical field industry, and they are adhere to follow the professional codes. This is making sure also that these individuals must be updated with the state of the arts methods, professional knowledge, and techniques. And this reminds me of the reason why we need to acquire CPE, the continually professional education, diba? The learnings. Then working in an area or job which one is insufficiently competent is unprofessional and irresponsible. So that is competency. Then the next one is objectivity. So what do you mean by that? Um, the article says that it remained unbiased and independent of specific perspectives or interests. Well, the professional is also not supposed to experiment, no, with individual approach or subjective ideas, but rather is supposed to adhere to the approved methods of the profession. So there is always an approved methods of the professions or the code of practice. Then the professional's work also should not be biased by personal preferences or opinions, but stick to an objective perspective. For example, an engineer should not subdue professional standards and sign off flawed construction plans because the boss is pressuring him or her to do so. So we need to remain objective, no? Objectivity. That is the second core principle of professional ethics. Then the third one is responsibility. The article says that, or emphasizes it as a professional has the responsibility to use his or her knowledge and skills properly, and he or she is responsible for the results of his or her work. Okay, so since we are the expert in our field, the professional should not abuse the asymmetry in knowledge to cheat the client or customer or provide substandard work knowing that the client or customer will not recognize this, right? Also, the professional should not abuse the asymmetry of knowledge or personal benefits, for instance, by providing and charging unnecessary services. For example, a physician should not sell unnecessary treatments to the patient to make additional money. So that is unprofessional. So that makes the word unprofessional because he is not or she is not practicing the core principles. Then, in other words, professionals should be transparent and honest about their work and not, use their advantage in knowledge to withhold or hide important information from relevant stakeholders, right? So that's the third one. And the fourth one is, of course, integrity. The article describes integrity as by making sure that all actions are consistent with professional standards and principles. So pretty much straightforward. So integrity by definition means avoiding conflicting and contradicting actions. A professional should uphold professional integrity by making sure that all actions are consistent with professional standards and principles because there is already a code of practice or code of conduct for the professionals, right? So we just need to adhere with that codes. And the last one is public interest. So what do you mean by public interest? Professional duty to protect the public interest by practicing the right professional services commitment to the professional principles. So, as an example, yeah, an engineer, for instance, he is responsible for the technological safety of construction plants, right? And has a duty to uphold that safety against other interests or pressures. Then, if the engineer's boss or client would demand a cheaper solution, which the engineer judges to be dangerous, the engineer would have to resist and deny her or his signature approval to such a solution. So he shouldn't sign the floor plan, the structural plan, because he is aware that that kind of solution is really dangerous. And remember, that is part of the ethical principles of professionals. Then, since engineers have crucial function for guaranteeing the technological safety, so as with lawyers have a crucial function as well for the legal system, and of course physicians are crucial also for healthcare industry, right? And that makes it public interest. That is the fifth core principles. All right, so moving on with a few more slides. Yeah, the the last topic that I'll be discussing is about the professional ethics example and by application. So let's find out on how to apply these core principles when we are part of this professional individuality in the world of business. So the article actually have two, but I chose to provide example of as an accountant, so for better understanding. So based on the article and given that an accountant is example, well, for competency, which is part of the core, accountants are bound to the code of practice or code of professional conduct, which is in the United States, it's the American Institute for Certified Public Accountants, or we call it AICPA. Then each individuals or CPAs are responsible in assessing themselves in accordance to this conduct to ensure that the required competency and upholding those principles stipulated from the ICPA are being followed. So that is the control for competency. Then for objectivity, AICPA code is particularly detailed about the professional principle of objectivity. For example, that the professional should adhere to professional standards and methods and not be biased in his work by his own or others' interest. Then, since accountant may face difficult situation, of course, they are vulnerable also. And majority of their responsibility is to produce and evaluate financial data that have significant impacts for the companies, right? Investors and even to the stock markets and others, no, in the financial industry. Then there can be various situations where financial interests could impact the independence and objectivity of an accountant. And accountants can face significant pressure and influence, right? Then this is the reason why that AICPA is very particular and pretty much straightforward in defining the objectivity principle for the accountants, which is really good. Then for the responsibility, actually the article specifies it. The AICPA code defines the professional principle of responsibility in more general terms. The code emphasizes, which is the AICPA 2018 0.300.020, specify the responsibilities directly. And it says that, well, I took a snap of it. The code emphasizes that accountants have a professional responsibility to exercise sensitive professional and moral judgments in all of their activities and dealings. So there is actually a particular code for AICPA for responsibility. Then for the integrity, yeah, another code, AICPA 2018 0.300.040 specify the conduct of integrity. And for the public interest, AICPA 2018 0.300.030, which is this is actually pretty much interesting because it clearly specifies that the public interest which the accounting profession serves and has to protect is the orderly functioning of commerce. They are bound with this principle in AICPA. In other words, accountants are important for the proper functioning of the capitalist market economy by providing integrity, financial reports, right, and unbiased information, fair and just, which is crucial for all market participants to make optimal decisions and for upholding fair competition. So there you go. So those are the application of the core principles by profession. So we applied based on the controls that is, existing controls in the different organizations in different professions, and we call that professional ethics. All right. So actually, that's my last slide, and of course, the obligatory slide is to send my gratitude. Thank you for listening.